It was like a mannequin that had just been pushed over on its side.
Her hair was perfectly in place. The makeup was perfect on her face.
Almost too perfect.
3 words jumped out: staged crime scene.
Tonight on 2020, this beautiful young daughter found hanging in a hotel shower. Did she take her own life, or did someone put her there?
A lot of people will ask, how could a mother look at the photographs from an autopsy?
I became my daughter's investigator. I didn't have a choice.
Clues only a mother could find at the scene where it happened. Her clothes, her face, even the way she was wearing her bracelet.
When they paint the portrait of an obsessed mother, what do you say?
It's a good thing I was.
And tonight, she wants answers from her daughter's fiancé.
I said to him, I'm not done with this.
But in her grief, is she going after an innocent man? The fiancé taking a polygraph in front of millions, what it reveals. And tonight, the 2020 exclusive, what we asked that led to this. A man's life ruined, or justice, all because of a mother's suspicion.
Here's David Muir and Elizabeth Vargas.
Call it a mother's intuition, but she was convinced when her stunning daughter was found hanging in that hotel shower, this was no suicide. But what happens when no one will listen?
In this case, Elizabeth, the mother begins digging herself, conducting her own surveillance, studying the autopsy, even the horrible photos of her own daughter. And tonight, you're about to see what no one else has seen, because as we come on the air, she's still digging. And you'll soon understand why Florida's top investigators are suddenly investigating all over again. On a Friday night, the last thing this Florida mother ever thought she'd be doing would be patrolling this small, picturesque beach town an hour south of Tampa. But for nearly 5 years now, this is exactly how Kelly Osborne has been spending every ounce of her free time, searching for answers, determined to uncover what really happened at this charming beachfront hotel, up these stairs, around the corner, and behind this hotel door, where her beautiful 22-year-old daughter, Sheena, was last seen alive.
She was my only daughter, so she was everything to me, from the day she was born and still to today.
And life without her?
Life without her, the last 5 years, I'm not the same person as I used to be.
Look at that!
Oh my gosh.
These images are from the last time Kelly would spend with her daughter, celebrating Christmas in 2008.
He wouldn't let me look, so I snooped.
You can see the smile on her daughter's face as Sheena opens her gifts.
Good thing that I bought the full-size one in New York, huh?
Just days after this video was taken, that daughter gone forever. The video, all this mother has left.
How often have you gone back to look at that?
I just went through it as recent as last night. It's her voice.
Black knee-high boots, yellow tie.
It's the things that I don't have anymore.
Now, that mother, a former real estate agent, has been thrust into a role she never imagined. A one-woman crusader investigating her own daughter's mysterious death.
What was Sheena like?
Sheena had a very vibrant personality. She was an amazing daughter. I could talk to her about anything.
About her love life, her hopes, her dreams for the future. And her babies, her 2 Yorkshire Terriers, Chloe and Encore.
You know how people keep babies' books? She had a baby book for her dog.
They were not forgotten on Christmas.
What you want, Chloe?
Those prized dogs would be the last ones with Sheena in that hotel room. They would be left behind, and so would Sheena's friends.
Do you miss Sheena? Do you still think about her?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you miss?
Everything.
She was a good friend to her
She's a
friends.
very good friend, yes.
Sheena owned the room the minute she walked into it. People were drawn to her. I was drawn to her. She was absolutely vivacious.
Loud, obnoxious alarm clock all time.
Vivacious, and among her group of friends, Sheena was the head turner.
There were always guys chasing her around, of course, which makes sense.
And the last guy to chase her would catch her, ultimately convincing her to marry him. Joe Genoese, a successful contractor, a builder, was trying to build a future with Sheena. They quickly fell in love, and she was his everything.
Sheena seemed to be happy, just kind of loving life.
I believed that Joe loved Sheena, and I know that she loved him.
But Sheena's mother was hardly sold.
I was told he was 35 when I first met him, and so the minute I laid eyes on him, I said, "You are not 35."
That was the first thing you said to him?
That was the first thing I said to him.
That's a protective mom, right from the get-go.
Yeah, it kind of floored me.
Joe was more than twice her daughter's age. He was 42 when they met. She was just 20. And that's not all that concerned her mother. Joe already had 3 children and was going through a nasty divorce. Not exactly this mother's idea of a perfect catch. And her daughter knew it.
Sheena looked at him and said, "My mother will have a full workup on you by morning." I did some public records search and, I found some tickets.
So she wasn't kidding?
No, she really wasn't kidding. She's my only child, and it was my job to take care of her and to look out for her.
But Joe thought he was looking out for her too, paying her rent, showering her with gifts. But while there was love, their May-December romance was also stormy from the start.
She wasn't the type of person to back down, and he clearly wasn't the type of person to back down, so they butt heads more often than not.
And Sheena's friends tell us the relationship seemed to feed on drama. Sheena's mother just hoping it would end on its own.
You thought it would end?
Yes. I was certain it was going to end.
Then, what this mother did not see coming, the ring that appeared on her daughter's finger.
When did you find out that they were engaged?
It was just something that just kind of showed up out there.
Their engagement wasn't a huge, exciting celebration for anyone. Not her, not him. To me, it seemed more like a Band-Aid on years of problems.
Oh, that's what I wanted.
And if there were problems, that Band-Aid was covering them well. Because on that Christmas morning, the last time Sheena's mother would see her alive, there were smiles and laughter. And another gift to go along with that engagement ring, a diamond bracelet.
Oh.
Even her mother, holding the camera, was impressed.
That is so gorgeous.
A bracelet revealing Joe's love for Sheena, and later perhaps revealing something else. And that wasn't the only gift, because just days later, another surprise, Joe giving Sheena a quick New Year's getaway. They were headed to Bradenton Beach, where they would stay in that hotel room where Sheena would last be seen alive. New Year's Eve, 8 p.m.
They had dinner at a restaurant across the street from their hotel. That was a restaurant where they planned on getting married.
Sheena's friends remember she was in high spirits that night, getting messages from her while she was sitting at the dinner table with Joe.
I received a text message from her saying Happy New Year, and then she let me know that her cousin was in labor. She was beyond excited. She was going to be an auntie.
At the stroke of midnight, the couple back in their room.
They watched some fireworks off the balcony. And around midnight, of course, they had the New Year's Eve kiss.
But soon, the sound of those fireworks replaced by something else, the shouting coming from their room. The couple had gotten into an argument.
It got pretty heated. The people that were staying in the hotel room next door ended up calling 911.
1:47 a.m., not even 2 hours into the new year, and this.
Manatee County 911.
There's 2 people over there just screaming and yelling, a woman and a man at each other.
The police arrive just as Joe, the future husband, is leaving. They pass him as they head up the stairs into that room to find Sheena and her dogs.
Sheena wouldn't go into too much detail about what the argument was about.
Soon the police would leave, but this case was far from over. The most shocking twist was about to come next.
I answer the phone and I go, "Sheena, Sheena," and there's no answer. Now I'm screaming into the phone, and then all of a sudden I hear a man's voice in the background.
What happened inside that hotel room that would devastate this mother? And the last time anyone would hear Sheena's voice again, a call to 911.
She did make me bleed and left claw marks all over me and stuff.
When we come back.
2020 continues with Suspicion. Once again, David Muir.
For most families, New Year's Day is a celebration, but it would soon turn into the worst day of this mother's life. 12:24 that afternoon, Kelly Osborne gets a call from Joe Genoese, her daughter's fiance.
He talked to Kelly and told her that he was having trouble getting a hold of Sheena. She became concerned for her daughter and went over to her apartment.
Then suddenly, that mother's cell phone ringing. The name that comes up offers hope.
I answer the phone and I go, "Sheena, Sheena," there's no answer. Now I'm screaming into the phone. I'm upset and calling for her. And then all of a sudden, I hear a man's voice in the background.
That voice, one of the police officers in her daughter's hotel room. It turns out, Kelly says, they inadvertently called her from her daughter's cell phone.
That's when you knew something was wrong.
That's when I found out something was wrong.
Was when police accidentally called you from her phone.
They said, we need you to give us your address.
The fiancé, Joe, is summoned to Sheena's mother's house too. And when police arrive, they tell them Sheena is dead, found alone in that hotel room.
Getting a notification like that is the most horrifying event you could have in your life. All we knew was that she was deceased. We didn't know how.
A mother begging for answers.
I'm asking them, well, where did you find her? And they say that she was found in the shower. What we were thinking was, did she slip and fall? Did she hit her head?
But the answer would be far more heartbreaking.
The police never told us. So when the medical examiner does call us and say, we've just completed the autopsy and it's consistent with a hanging, we're just dumbfounded.
Sheena was found with her clothes on, hanging in the shower, one of her precious dog's leashes around her neck, and with no signs of a struggle in the room and no obvious injuries to Sheena's body. The detective in the case, Leonard Diaz, and that police department quickly ruling it a suicide. But family and friends immediately argued it didn't add up.
The moment I got the call, I knew that something was not right about the situation.
And Kelly says her daughter was hardly someone planning her own demise. The smiles in that video just days before. And so many other telling signs in the days before her death.
She renewed a subscription to a magazine.
Yes, she did. She renewed her AAA for the year.
Left her rent check.
Yes, yeah. Rent check is all filled out, ready to be paid for the, month of January.
And she says what also didn't make sense were those joyful text messages Sheena sent from that New Year's Eve dinner with Joe.
And that night, Sheena's texting all her friends. She's all excited, saying, I'm going to be an auntie, I'm going to be an auntie.
Kelly says she immediately wanted answers from one person.
3 days after Sheena died, I had asked Joe to come out to the garage, that I wanted to talk to him.
And she delivered this message.
This isn't over. Sheena didn't commit suicide. I said, you can make this as easy or as hard on me and yourself as you would like.
Kelly was done selling houses, now a mother trying to solve a crime with no idea where to start.
I have every police report in here.
She studied hundreds of other suicides, looking for patterns.
And the one common theme that kept coming up were drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And yet the amount of alcohol in your daughter's body
was under the legal limit. She could have legally driven. It might have been 1 drink, 2.
And any drugs?
No, none.
And that was just the first discovery. She began poring over her daughter's cell phone records and discovered a call to 911 that night, not the one from the neighbors who heard that screaming, but it turns out there was also a call from Sheena herself.
911, what's the emergency?
Hi, my name is Sheena.
Her mother says police never revealed that.
I called Detective Diaz, and he said only the people in the room next door made a 911 phone call. I had to go and learn how to try to retrieve a 911 phone call, and when I did, I delivered it to Detective Diaz.
Sure enough, it was her daughter calling after that argument with Joe, 2:10 that morning.
She did make me bleed and left claw marks all over me and stuff.
They had had many fights before. She chose to call the police on this particular night for a reason. This one had to be a big one.
And Sheena's mother discovered something else. The text messages her daughter sent to Joe after that 911 call. Sheena at 1:53 in the morning, you're evil and scary. Sheena writing to Joe at 2:12, stop being an alpha male and stop putting your hands on a woman. And there were images too.
How did you discover the pictures?
They had released the camera to us. And that's where we found that she was actually taking pictures of herself, of what he did to her.
The photos on her camera showing a cut on her neck, a scratch on her finger.
So the police, they'd never looked at the pictures?
They knew what was in her camera. And they dismissed it.
And as Kelly quietly pored over every piece of evidence, there was someone else who got a tip, a reporter, a former cop himself, Lee Williams.
I got a call from a source in law enforcement who said I needed to look at this case. I went to the website and talked to Kelly. I was hooked.
You were?
Yeah.
There were enough red flags right from the start.
Right away.
Lee Williams has reported extensively on the case for the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, writing that the lead detective in the case had never been sent out on a homicide investigation alone before, asking how would he know if he were looking at one now.
Any suspicious death should be initially viewed as a potential homicide. He walked in, he saw her hanging, and I think he just, in his mind, it became a suicide.
Sheena's mother started calling that detective, convinced the investigation had been botched.
I had called him and said, have you questioned the boyfriend yet? His exact words to me were, no, why? Should I?
The detective waited 22 days before interviewing Joe Genoese, during which any wounds or scratches that he had on his body could have healed.
Do they write up a report?
No, he did not.
How do you not document?
I certainly would have documented the conversation, probably videotaped it too.
And the big question, just where did Joe go after that hotel room that night? He told police he went home and there was a tenant in his townhouse who saw him. But Sheena's mother said police at first never went to check on that alibi. We reached out to the Bradenton Beach Police Department and to that detective. They've declined to comment, but that reporter, the former cop, did track down the witness who offered that alibi.
And when you asked him, did you see Joe on New Year's Day?
He saw Joe. He doesn't remember what time it took place. He had been drinking all day. Kind of hard to establish an alibi time.
But the Bradenton Beach Police have long said they didn't rely solely on that alibi. They say they have cell phone records, pings from Joe's cell phone calls and his text messages, revealing his locations. In fact, they say those pings trace his route home.
I've never seen the pings. They've been sealed by a judge. I'd love to see them.
When we come back, the most revealing evidence of all. You're about to see the crucial clues in the photos of her dead daughter.
A lot of people will ask, how could a mother look at the photographs from an autopsy?
What they show as 2020 returns to that very same hotel shower.
How are you?
And later tonight, the fiance with Sheena that New Year's Eve. How does he explain the evidence? Long after most of us put our work weeks behind us, Kelly Osborne is still up at night, still poring through every piece of evidence. But by far the most difficult pieces to study are the images of her dead daughter.
A lot of people will ask, how could a mother look at the photographs from an autopsy?
I don't recommend it to any parent.
But why did you?
I had to. I became my daughter's investigator. I didn't have a choice.
And immediately there were clues, the kind she says only a mother would notice.
The first thing, I was very shocked at looking at her eyes. Sheena and I, we wore the same mascara. And I know that when we cry with this mascara on, your eyelashes are all clumped up, and hers were perfect.
If Sheena took her own life, there were no tears, which experts say is very rare, her makeup untouched. And something else only a mom would notice, that diamond bracelet they fawned over at Christmas.
That is so gorgeous.
Kelly says it was on the wrong wrist.
Is on her right wrist. I knew that Sheena didn't wear her bracelets on her right wrist. As a matter of fact, that video on Christmas, when she got that bracelet, she takes that bracelet out of the box and holds it up and shows it with her right hand and automatically places it on her left wrist.
The crime scene photos also show both the bathroom and the shower doors left open. Sheena's mother, convinced she would never have done that with her babies, her two little dogs, right there in the room.
She would have made sure that her dogs didn't see her that way. One or both of those doors would have been closed.
And while that's what a mother noticed from those photos, veteran crime reporter Lee Williams saw something else.
There's a photo of Sheena in the shower. Her feet are caked with sand and debris, yet there's no debris on the white floor of the shower or on the white floor of the bathroom immediately outside the shower.
So her feet were caked in sand?
Yeah.
And yet there was no sand anywhere in that bathroom?
None whatsoever, other than on her feet.
For Williams, sand on her feet and not on the floor around her makes it nearly impossible to believe Sheena killed herself in that shower.
So either Sheena was carried in there post-mortem and hung, or she somehow levitated into that room.
Kelly had the reporter on her side, but what she truly needed were some big names, forensic heavyweights, and she got 3 of them to look at all of the evidence.
This is the room right here.
Yes.
One of them taking 2020 back to that very hotel room with her. Jan Johnson is one of those CSI experts who examined the evidence. She spent more than 40 years studying crime scenes. She immediately saw red flags.
There's a pillow lying on the floor. I would be very interested in what's on that pillow.
Jan says a veteran investigator would have ruled everything out, asking, could that pillow have been used to smother her?
Because you're thinking someone could have used one of these pillows to kill her.
Absolutely.
But most telling, says Jan, the bathroom, where she says crucial evidence was missed.
This is where Sheena was found, hanging from a dog leash.
That is correct, and it's attached to the shower head. You can see it's clipped at the top, extending downward. The noose is around her neck. Her buttocks is about 8 inches off the ground. She's extended towards the back side of the shower with her legs extended outward.
So she's not suspended in midair.
No, she's not.
Her legs are actually on the bottom of the shower.
Flat, yes.
Wouldn't that give someone ample opportunity to stand back up, to pull themselves back up?
Absolutely.
Jan also points to Sheena's clothes. If she were convulsing after hanging herself, Jan says she would expect the clothes to be riding up the body. But she points to the cuffs of her pants, actually down around her feet. And Jan says it looks more like she was dragged into the shower.
The pants are extended outward, and you would have expected if she had, walked her way down the shower wall and hung herself, that the pants would have gone up her legs. I mean, her clothing is perfect.
She appeared serene, like she had just fallen asleep. A hanging is a violent act. Towards the end, your body fights that. It fights the ligature. It struggles to get air. And there was no evidence of any of that.
Her hair was perfectly in place.
Yeah.
And in fact, you've described it as tucked right behind her ear the way she typically would.
It was like a mannequin that had just been pushed over on its side. I've never seen a hanging like that.
And one more giant red flag for Jan and that entire team of experts was what they saw in Sheena's eyes.
So when you looked at those images and you saw that in both eyes she had popped blood vessels, you immediately thought
she'd been strangled. You usually see petechial hemorrhages in a strangulation. You don't often see them in a hanging.
The hemorrhaging in Sheena's eyes, they believe, is more consistent with a violent struggle, a strangling. And then the bombshell conclusion. All three experts weighing in, and in every one of their reports.
3 words jumped out. Staged crime scene. And that's huge. That means that what was done to Sheena was staged to make it appear as a suicide.
What I think happened in that room that night, she may have been suffocated on the bed, and I think that she was dragged into the shower and placed into that leash on that shower head.
When we come back, this mother's mountain of evidence and the stunning change from the medical examiner, blowing the case wide open.
The day a local mother has been waiting for years.
Tonight, her persistence is finally paying off.
As Joe Genoese takes a polygraph test in front of millions before sitting down one-on-one with 2020.
Once and for all, did you kill Sheena?
Stay with us.
More of Suspicion on 2020. Once again, David Muir.
As this Florida mother walks the beach, there is little peace, consumed by the mystery surrounding what happened to her daughter in a hotel just across the street. And while she says police in this small town wouldn't listen to her, she now had 3 leading voices on her side. The forensics experts who share her sneaking suspicion her daughter was murdered.
I remember when the call came, with absolute certainty, they said that this was not a suicide, that in fact it was a staged crime scene.
All 3 of them?
Yes. And then I said, are you willing to submit affidavits to me? And they said, absolutely.
Armed with those affidavits, Kelly got a meeting with the medical examiner who had classified Sheena's death a suicide. And right there, while sitting across from her, the break she was waiting for, he changed that one key line on Sheena's death certificate.
They changed the manner of death to undetermined pending further investigation. And we thought, well, that automatically opens this case. No. You know what Detective Diaz tells me? That's just their opinion.
In fact, that detective who answered the call remained convinced that Sheena did kill herself, and He went on local station WTSP to say so.
She wants to say she's not in denial. I say she is. I say she just can't accept her daughter committing suicide.
When they paint the portrait of an obsessed mother, what do you say?
It's a good thing I was. Obsessive, or you call it just doing their job for them.
And this mother turned private investigator finally had people listening.
The day a local mother has been waiting for years.
Sheena's mom believes her daughter was murdered. She says police got it wrong when they declared her daughter's death a suicide.
There's a tremendous amount of pressure that's been applied to not only those police officers, but the mayor of Bradenton Beach as well.
Do you think they underestimated this mother?
I do. I think they saw her as they have described her, as just a grieving mother.
And it wasn't just the medical examiner. She had her sights set on the state's top investigators next, turning to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, a panel with the power to take another look at the case. And they did, asking to hear from that first detective who labeled Sheena's death a suicide.
So they take a look at all the evidence.
The evidence is presented to them by Detective Diaz. He goes over his findings from his investigation.
And what does this panel decide?
The case needs to be reopened.
State investigators say they will now be looking into this case.
And when you heard that they were going to take another look?
That I was cautiously optimistic about what was taking place.
Was this a hard-fought victory?
Oh my. Yes.
Finally, they were going to investigate your daughter's death.
Finally, and why? Why did we have to fight for 4 years? 4 years. Nobody would listen.
But now they were. Local station Fox 13 following her as she wheels her years of evidence straight through those doors.
Justice has not been served in the murder of my daughter.
You were conducting surveillance.
Yes.
On Joe.
Yes, I was.
You were following him?
One could call it that, but I'd rather refer to it as a surveillance.
That surveillance, that digging, led to one more alarming discovery. Just 6 months after Sheena's death, Joe was arrested for battery involving his ex-wife. The charges later dropped, but Kelly was determined investigators hear it all.
A New Year's Eve getaway gone wrong.
And just as the state was taking another look, millions across America were about to see the case too.
These two people think you had something to do with their daughter's death.
There were Sheena's parents, Kelly, and her father, Dave, on the Dr. Phil show. And they were stunned that right there with them was Joe.
All of these things are lies. They're not true.
So confident in his innocence, he agrees to a polygraph test.
Some would say, who would agree to go on a national TV show and take a polygraph test unless you're certain you're innocent?
Exactly, especially since the polygraphist that conducted the examination is one of the best in the country. He is the former chief polygraphist for the FBI's LA field office.
Maybe he thought that after 4.5 years, he's been so convincing to all the authorities that he'd be convincing there too.
He would have to convince them on 2 major points.
The 2 questions were,
did he kill Sheena, or was he involved somehow in her death?
And with millions watching, the results.
And the polygraph result on both questions is that that answer was deceptive. That you were not telling the truth.
But he fails it.
He failed it terribly. Not slightly. He fails miserably. I literally became nauseous.
In my mind, Joe's a suspect in the murder.
And while a polygraph is not admissible in court, it did not bode well for Joe Genoese with that new investigation underway. When we come back, Joe Genoese one-on-one with us. His only interview since failing that polygraph.
How do you explain those test results?
And what it was that led to this.
Wake up.
When we come back. Tonight, as some of Florida's top investigators take another look at the mysterious death of Sheena Morris, found dead in that hotel shower, the man she was getting ready to marry, who failed that polygraph, has decided to sit down with 2020.
Hello, how are you?
Nearly 5 years after he lost his fiancée, Joe says he is a victim too.
So why sit down with me?
Because I had to tell you my side of the story. I'm being victimized because I cared about someone. I was there for her when her family a lot of times wasn't.
Put under the microscope, he says, by a mother determined to prove her daughter did not commit suicide.
A story we've been following for years now.
Joe says the portrait painted of his relationship with Sheena is not a true one.
For a domestic dispute between Morris and her fiance.
We've interviewed a lot of Sheena's friends. Many of her friends say that this was a tumultuous relationship.
I just don't understand where they're getting at. You know,
there wasn't any fighting?
Well, in a relationship, there's always arguments and stuff.
It was never physical?
No. You know, in a normal relationship, there was fights, there was, you know, back and forth, but there was never any violence. No.
Nor was there ever any violence with his ex-wife, according to Joe, when we asked him about those battery charges that were dropped.
It was a push back and forth. She pushed me, I pushed her back, and then she looked at me and says, now you're going to jail.
And he points out his ex-wife dropped it all. And he says his fights with Sheena, including the one that New Year's night, were often caused by her jealousy of the family he already had. And he also says that Sheena was often depressed. Remember that Christmas morning video where Kelly sees her daughter smiling and laughing? He sees something else, remembering the fiance who couldn't get out of bed that morning, who didn't want to spend Christmas, he says, with her family.
She wasn't out of bed for 2 days, hadn't eaten anything in 2 days. And
was she depressed?
I guess she was upset with the fact, or depressed with the fact that I was spending time with my kids over the holidays.
And Joe says that surprise New Year's trip was out of concern for Sheena because she had been down.
And I said to myself, maybe we'll just go down there for New Year's Eve, since we had a crappy Christmas.
And Joe says that Sheena was happy that New Year's Eve night. He remembers too, as she sat there texting her friends from the dinner table.
We went out to dinner at the place we were going to get married at. She was texting and talking with her family most of the night.
And he remembers their kiss at midnight.
And then New Year's, 12 o'clock came, and we went out on the balcony, and fireworks went off, and, we celebrated New Year's.
A New Year's kiss?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Everything was great.
Great, he says, until he went back inside that hotel room to call his children, to wish them a Happy New Year too.
It lasted all about 15, 20 seconds that I was on the phone. And as I turned back around, she was right there. She just looked at me and said, you just f***ed up the whole night.
Why did she have such a big problem with you calling your kids?
She just didn't want me involved with my children. It was like another family to her. And she started getting really upset, screaming and yelling, and then she started punching the wall.
Joe says initially it was Sheena's idea to leave the hotel, but that she suddenly changed her mind, refusing to go.
She actually at one point tried to grab the money that I had on the bureau, and she said that I wasn't leaving, and I told her I am leaving, we're leaving, because at that point, from her punching the wall and screaming and yelling the way she did, I was afraid that, cops were going to come.
But guests were already placing that call to 911.
There's two people over there just screaming and yelling, a woman and a man at each other.
And Joe told us what police say he's always told them.
And where did you go?
Home, straight to my townhouse, where there were people there, they were having a party, and at least 5 or 6 people saw me.
On the drive home, Joe says Sheena was on the phone with him, suddenly sinking into that depression.
What was she saying to you?
There was one thing that she did say. In a somber note, she said, if I can't have you all to myself, I don't want to be here.
Had she ever said that before?
No.
And as for that 911 call Sheena made just after 2 a.m.?
She did make me bleed and left claw marks all over me and stuff.
The scrape on her finger, we know that came from her punching the wall. And the scrape on her neck when she went to grab the money off of the bureau, and I grabbed her by her shirt, and it got her necklace, and left a little scratch on her neck. That's it.
And he says, like the mother who loves Sheena, he was devastated too on that New Year's Day when they all learned Sheena was dead.
And I walk up and I look, and it's like, what's going on? And he looked at me and said, I'm sorry for your loss. And I fell to my knees. And I just looked at him. I couldn't believe what he said to me. Can we cut? Can we cut?
And when he was ready to continue,
she was a beautiful girl. This is a tragedy in everybody's lives,
For you too?
Absolutely. I was engaged to her.
Do you think everybody's forgotten that you felt this way too?
No, I just think that they're on the Kelly train, and if you go against what Kelly says, then you're not an advocate of Sheena.
A grieving mother out for answers no matter the cost, refusing to accept the possibility that her daughter could have taken her own life, or a fiancé covering his tracks.
We've talked to Sheena's mother, her family, her friends, and they all categorically say she never would have taken her own life.
My personal opinion is nobody ever thinks they're going to take their own life. Does anybody presume that somebody's going to take their own life?
Did she ever say to you that she was depressed or having suicidal thoughts?
She told me she tried to commit suicide when she was 15 years old. Took a bottle of pills.
In fact, that's the same story police say Sheena's mother told them the day her body was found.
Had there ever been suicidal thoughts before?
She had gotten in some trouble with her dad, and she kind of like said to her father that she took some pills. They checked everything out. She really didn't take anything. It was a false alarm.
Joe says he understands Kelly's need for answers, but says she's looking in the wrong place. But how does he explain the mountain of evidence? The sand on Sheena's feet, but no sand in the shower. Her perfect appearance, her hair, her clothes, and that diamond bracelet on the wrong wrist.
I let the professionals deal with that, the investigators and everything else.
He welcomes this new investigation because he insists he still has nothing to hide.
Once and for all, did you kill Sheena?
Absolutely not. What would be my motive, for God's sake? I'm 50 years old. I have 3 children.
But what about the polygraph?
But why take the test?
Because I had nothing to hide.
How do you explain those test results?
Well, I don't. I was uneasy with a lot of the questions he asked. First of all, second of all, I was told by a professional that the questions that he asked should have never been asked. They were set up questions.
But now for Joe, there are new questions to answer, this time from those investigators taking a fresh look at the case, with the real possibility that someone could be charged with murder.
When was the last time you talked to the investigators on the team?
3 weeks ago.
Were you nervous?
Of course I'm nervous. I mean, who wouldn't be nervous?
When we come back, Joe's message tonight for Sheena's mother, what he wants her to hear. And we ask Kelly, how will she react if no one is charged with murder of her daughter's death?
Will this ever be over?
Stay with us.
Once again, David Muir.
Sheena Morris's mother gave up everything to become the lead investigator in her daughter's case when she says no one else would, determined to find answers. The boyfriend who lost his fiancée says all these years he's been asking questions too of the young girlfriend found in that shower.
I ask the question all the time. I asked it, why did you do this? I don't understand it. I mean, who understands it? I don't.
Tonight, that team of investigators taking a second look at the case, and a Florida prosecutor will decide what comes next. Will there be murder charges? Or will they agree with that first detective who showed up at that hotel and found Sheena in the shower, convinced it was a suicide?
What are you hoping to hear?
I'm hoping my phone rings and it's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and say, Ms. Osborne, we have a suspect in custody.
Will this ever be over?
When there's a trial and the jury finds the suspect guilty, that chapter will be over.
She needs some answers. The community, Southwest Florida, would like to know what happened to Sheena.
Do you think they'll ever know?
Yeah, I do. I would be very surprised if they come back with it was a suicide, because the evidence is overwhelming that it's not.
Joe, as you sit here across from me, have you gone there? Have you thought about possible charges?
I'm not guilty of anything, so...
You don't fear there are charges coming?
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, if anything, I think I should bring civil charges against Kelly and her family.
Do you plan to?
We'll see how... I'm going to wait till the investigation is over with. You know, there's no reason why this family did what they did to me.
If they clear you once and for all, do you think that will be enough for Sheena's mother?
No, I don't think she'll ever stop.
And Sheena's friends don't want her to.
What do you think Sheena would say? What do you think she would make of what her mother has done?
I think she would be impressed. There was never one day or one moment where any of us even questioned or thought that Kelly was going to give up this fight, and she won't.
And what do you think Sheena would say to you?
She'd tell me how much she loved me. She would tell me, I'm glad you knew, Mom. I'm glad you knew, and I'm glad you saw it through.
A mother's unwavering devotion, and that team of state investigators, along with the prosecutor, set to reveal whether they think there could be murder charges any day now.
And that's our program for tonight. I'm Elizabeth Vargas.
And I'm David Muir. I'll see you here this weekend, and for all of us here at 2020 and ABC News,